What if I told you Luke Skywalker nearly faced Darth Vader years before The Empire Strikes Back? Because while most Star Wars fans remember Cloud City as the moment Luke truly confronted Vader, their story actually began much earlier. In the months following the destruction of the Death Star, Luke wasn't training with Yoda, he wasn't becoming a Jedi, he was fighting a war, building relationships, searching for answers, and unknowingly moving closer to the man who would change his life forever. And while the movies skip over these years, the comics, novels, and expanded stories reveal some of the most important moments in Luke Skywalker's life. Moments that transformed him from the hero of Yavin into the soon-to-be Jedi we meet in Empire Strikes Back.
This is the way. This is the way.
Welcome to Fatherly Fandom. I'm your host, Chris, and if you love Star Wars deep dives, character breakdowns, lore discussions, and all things nerdy, you're absolutely in the right place. So hit that subscribe button. Your inner nerd will thank you. And don't forget to click that bell icon too, because YouTube loves turning notifications off by default. And if you want to stay up to date with all the amazing content coming to this channel, you're definitely going to want those notifications turned on. Today, we're continuing our journey through Luke Skywalker's missing years between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. In chapters 1 through 3, we explored Luke's rise as the hero of Yavin, his struggles without a Jedi teacher, and his first steps towards becoming a leader within the Rebel Alliance. We watched him transition from the farm boy who destroyed the Death Star into someone the rebellion was beginning to depend on. But now, Luke's journey takes a much more dangerous turn. Today, we're diving into chapters 4 through 6, the birth of Rogue Squadron, Luke's search for Jedi knowledge through Obi-Wan Kenobi's journals, and the dangerous encounter that taught him just how far he still had to go before becoming a Jedi. So let's jump in. Chapter 4, the birth of Rogue Squadron. As the Rebel Alliance continued fighting the Empire after the Battle of Yavin, the rebellion faced a new challenge. The destruction of the Death Star had given the galaxy hope, but it also painted a target on the Alliance. The Empire wasn't weakened, it was angry, and Rebel pilots were being asked to undertake increasingly dangerous missions. The Alliance needed more than starfighters. It needed its best pilots working together. And from that need, Rogue Squadron was born. Now, depending on whether you're looking at canon or Legends material, the story of Rogue Squadron's formation is a little different. In Legends, Rogue Squadron became one of the most famous military units in the entire Star Wars galaxy. Following the Battle of Yavin, Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles helped assemble an elite group of rebel pilots capable of taking on the Empire's most dangerous missions. Over time, Rogue Squadron became known for its deep strike operations, reconnaissance missions, intelligence gatherings, and battles that ordinary pilots simply couldn't survive. Legends would eventually expand the Squadron story through novels, comics, and video games, turning Rogue Squadron into one of the most beloved military units in Star Wars. Many fans still consider these stories some of the best starfighter-focused storytelling the franchise has ever produced. In canon, the details are a little different. While Rogue Squadron still exists, its origins at this point are less clearly defined. The squadron gradually emerges as the rebellion reorganizes after Yavin, with Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles serving among its most recognizable pilots. Instead of a single founding moment, canon presents Rogue Squadron as an evolving elite unit built through experience, trust, and necessity. But despite those differences, both versions agree on one thing: Rogue Squadron represented the very best of the Rebel Alliance. Pilots willing to fly impossible missions, face impossible odds, and sacrifice everything for the cause. And at the center of that legacy was Luke Skywalker. What made Rogue Squadron special wasn't just skill, it was reputation. These were the pilots sent when missions were considered impossible. The pilots trusted to fly into situations where survival wasn't guaranteed. Over time, the squadron would become synonymous with some of the rebellion's most important victories. For Luke, serving alongside pilots like Wedge Antilles reinforced an important lesson. The rebellion wasn't won by individuals. It was won by teams. No matter how skilled a pilot might be, nobody saved the galaxy alone. And nowhere is that lesson more evident than in the story Luke would soon learn about Scarif. One of the most fascinating moments from Marvel's Star Wars comics comes when Luke learns more about the events that made the destruction of the Death Star possible in the first place. Like many rebels, Luke knew the plans had been stolen, but he didn't initially understand the full story. He didn't know about Jyn Erso. He didn't know about Cassian Andor. He didn't know about the team that called themselves Rogue One. As Luke begins learning about what happened on Scarif, that story changes the way he sees himself, because suddenly the destruction of the Death Star isn't just his victory anymore, it's theirs. Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor gave their lives to transmit the Death Star plans. K2SO sacrificed himself so the mission could continue. Chirrut Îmwe walked through blaster fire to activate the communication switch. Baze Malbus died protecting his friends. Bodhi Rook gave everything to ensure the plans reached the Rebel fleet, and countless Rebel soldiers sacrificed themselves during the Battle of Scarif. For Luke, this realization is humbling, because the shot that made him a hero only existed because countless others had already sacrificed everything. The victory at Yavin wasn't his alone. It belonged to everyone who fought and died to make that moment possible. And perhaps that's why the name Rogue Squadron carried so much meaning. Because before there was Rogue Squadron, there was Rogue One, a team of ordinary people who accomplished the impossible. And in many ways, that sacrifice became part of the foundation upon which Luke Skywalker and Rogue Squadron would build their legacy. But while Luke is learning more about the sacrifices that built the rebellion, he's still struggling with another challenge, the Force. Because despite everything that's happened, he still has no idea how to become a Jedi. Chapter 5, Obi-Wan's Journals. If Luke couldn't find a Jedi Master, then he would have to learn another way, and that's exactly what he begins trying to do. As the war against the Empire continues, Luke found himself increasingly drawn towards the mystery of the Jedi. The Force had helped him destroy the Death Star. Obi-Wan had told him his father was a Jedi, and yet Luke still knew almost nothing about what that actually meant. There was no Jedi Temple, no Jedi Council, no ancient master waiting to train him. All he had were fragments, stories, memories, and eventually, Obi-Wan Kenobi's journals. One of the most fascinating aspects of Marvel's Obi-Wan comic series is that it allows Luke to learn about the man behind the legend. Not the wise old mentor from A New Hope, not the legendary Jedi general from the Clone Wars, but the man who spent nearly 20 years living alone in the deserts of Tatooine. As Luke begins reading these journals, he discovers a version of Obi-Wan he never knew existed. A man struggling to find purpose after losing everything. A man carrying the weight of failure. A man trying to honor a promise made long ago. One of the first things Luke learns is just how much Obi-Wan sacrificed to protect him. The journals reveal years of quiet vigilance, years spent watching from a distance, intervening when necessary, remaining hidden when possible, always keeping watch over the son of Anakin Skywalker. For Luke, it's a shocking realization. Obi-Wan hadn't simply appeared in his life during A New Hope. He had been there all along. Watching, protecting, waiting, and believing that one day Luke might become something greater. The journals also reveal stories from Obi-Wan's exile that Luke never could have imagined. Stories about helping settlers and moisture farmers survive the dangers of Tatooine. Stories about protecting innocent people from raiders and criminals. Stories about doing the right thing despite having every reason to walk away. As Luke continues reading, he begins recognizing something else hidden within Obi-Wan Kenobi's stories. A pattern, a philosophy, a way of living. Even though Obi-Wan rarely quotes the Jedi Code directly, his actions embody it. The Jedi Code teaches there is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. For Luke, these words aren't just philosophy. They're suddenly becoming real because he can see Obi-Wan living them. When Obi-Wan chooses patience instead of anger, he's living the code. When he spends his years learning and reflecting instead of giving in to despair, he is living the code. When he continues helping people despite his personal pain, he is living the code. And when he accepts the loss of the Jedi Order without abandoning hope, he is definitely living the code. The more Luke reads, the more he realizes something important. Obi-Wan's greatest strength was never his lightsaber. It wasn't his rank as a Jedi Master. It wasn't even his connection to the Force. It was his commitment to the principles that define the Jedi. Even after the Republic fell, even after the Jedi were hunted nearly to extinction, even after losing his mentor, his friends, and Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan still chose compassion, still chose service, still chose hope. That's why he's the GOAT of Star Wars. And for Luke, that might be the most important lesson in the journals. Because for the first time, he begins to understand that becoming a Jedi isn't about learning powers, it's about learning how to live. One particular story follows Obi-Wan helping a young moisture farmer whose family is threatened by local raiders. It's not a galaxy-shaking conflict. There's no Sith, no massive battle, no grand destiny, just ordinary people who need help. And Obi-Wan helps them. Not because anyone will remember it, but because it's the right thing to do. Luke also discovers something unexpected. Obi-Wan's carried tremendous guilt. Guilt over Anakin. Guilt over the fall of the Jedi. Guilt over everything that happened at the end of the Clone Wars. The legendary Jedi Master Luke admired wasn't immune to doubt. He's questioned himself, wondered if he failed, and spent years trying to find purpose after the collapse of everything he once believed in. For Luke, this is a powerful revelation because it means even great Jedi struggle, even heroes can fall, and even the wisest among them can question themselves. Yet Obi-Wan never stopped trying, never stopped serving, never stopped believing that the future could be better than the past. And that lesson stays with Luke, because the more he studies Obi-Wan's life, the more he realizes that being a Jedi isn't about perfection. It's about perseverance. It's about continuing forward despite fear, despite doubt, despite failure. And that's a lesson he's going to need sooner than he realizes, because while Luke is learning about Obi-Wan's past, his own future is rapidly approaching. The Force is becoming stronger in his life. His instincts are growing sharper. His connection to something larger than himself is becoming impossible to ignore. But despite everything he's learned, he still lacks one thing: training, real training, and soon he's about to discover just how dangerous that missing piece can be, because on the world of Cymoon 1, Luke Skywalker is about to come face to face with a reality he isn't prepared for. Chapter 6, Cymoon 1, and a painful lesson. As Luke continued studying Obi-Wan's journals, the war against the Empire showed no signs of slowing down. The Rebel Alliance was constantly searching for opportunities to strike Imperial targets. Every successful mission mattered. Every victory bought the rebellion a little more time, and one of those missions would lead Luke Skywalker directly into the path of Darth Vader. The target was Cymoon 1, a heavily fortified Imperial world home to a massive weapons factory. For the rebels, the objective was simple: disrupt Imperial production, damage the Empire's ability to wage war, and send a message that the rebellion wasn't going away. On paper, it seemed like a dangerous but manageable operation. The rebels expected stormtroopers, they expected TIE fighters, they expected Imperial resistance. They did not expect Darth Vader, and once Vader entered the battle, everything changed. The moment Vader arrives, the tone of the mission shifts completely. This is no longer a raid, it's survival. Luke had heard stories about Vader, the dark figure who served the Emperor, the Sith Lord who hunted the Jedi, the man Obi-Wan had warned him about. But hearing stories and witnessing Vader in action were two very different things. What Luke sees on Cymoon 1 is unlike anything he has ever experienced. Vader tears through rebel forces with terrifying efficiency. Blaster bolts that would kill ordinary soldiers are effortlessly deflected. Machinery bends and breaks under the power of the Force. Imperial troops rally around him. Rebels scatter before him. Every movement feels controlled, deliberate, unstoppable. For the first time in his life, Luke is witnessing a true master of the Force, and the experience is humbling. But until now, Luke's connection to the Force had been built on instinct, a feeling, a voice guiding him at crucial moments. Trusting his senses during the Death Star trench run, following his intuition into battle. But Vader represents something entirely different. Training, mastery, decades of experience. The gap between these two is enormous. Luke is brave, Luke is talented, Luke is Force sensitive, but standing in the shadow of Darth Vader, none of that feels like enough. The confrontation gives Luke a glimpse of a reality he hasn't fully understood before. The Force isn't just a gift, it's a discipline, a lifetime of study, a path that requires guidance. Every instinct Luke has relied on, every lesson he's managed to teach himself, every bit of confidence he's gained since Yavin suddenly feels very small compared to what Vader can do. And perhaps for the first time since destroying the Death Star, Luke realizes how much he still has to learn. This is not a triumphant victory. It's a wake-up call, a painful one, because Luke is forced to confront a truth he has been avoiding. He wants to be a Jedi, but wanting it and being ready for it are two very different things. And while Luke is struggling to survive the encounter, something else is happening. Vader is watching, studying, evaluating. The Dark Lord notices the young rebel pilot, not just his courage, not just his skill, but something deeper, something familiar, the Force. Luke may not realize it yet, but he has just placed himself directly in Darth Vader's sights. And Vader leaves Cymoon 1 with something far more valuable than victory. Interest, because for the first time, he has seen this young rebel up close, seen the potential, seen the determination, seen the connection to the Force, a connection that raises questions. Questions that Vader will soon be investigating. Questions that eventually lead him to a single name: Skywalker. And when Darth Vader learns that name, everything changes. For Luke, for Vader, and for the future of the galaxy itself. Luke entered Cymoon 1 believing he was beginning to understand the Force. He left knowing how little he truly understood. The hero of Yavin had taken another step forward, but he had also received a harsh reminder. The road to becoming a Jedi would be far more difficult than he imagined. Yet every challenge, every lesson, every victory, and every failure was slowly shaping the man he would become. And next time, we'll explore one of the most important turning points in Luke Skywalker's journey. How Darth Vader discovers the name Skywalker, how Luke begins becoming a symbol of hope across the galaxy, and how his bond with Leia Organa continues to grow long before either of them discover the truth. And if you enjoy this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapters in Luke Skywalker's missing years. So thanks for watching, guys, and as always, stay nerdy, my friends. May the Force be with you, and I'll see you next time.